Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wealthi Expat. Sam, how are you? It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, likewise. I love a good Friday evening podcast. I've saved up all my beans for this hour, so I'm all yours.
Well, I'm sure you've got a couple margaritas waiting for you once this finishes to rip into. Enjoy your Friday evening. So, yes, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
So today I thought it would be great to get you on the show. We could have a bit of a chat about what we're seeing in the Melbourne property market, get a bit of your perspective from a sense and understand what you're seeing, what sort of trends you're seeing, and what you kind of, essentially predict over the next 12 months, you could say, as we do ease out of these lockdown restrictions and COVID becomes a thing of the past. Let's hope. But yeah, we'll dig into a couple of those topics, and yeah, it'll be good to understand your perspective. So looking forward to it. It's Melbourne is definitely still on the cards as a top growth, capital city to invest into. So there's some really good pockets that we should eye out for. So happy to discuss. Yeah. So let's do it. I guess to start off and just give us a general overview as a sense of the Melbourne market.
Yeah.
What sort of things have you been seeing over the last 6 to 12 months as we have been in these lockdowns and these restrictions, and now we're, I guess, in limbo back and forth between them, but what have you noticed over the last
there was
months?
Definitely a big confidence drop in Melbourne. I guess a big motivating factor when people are investing is livability, and they went through this big depression of a 4-month lockdown compared to the rest of Australia. So what that actually meant was that there was a lot of migrants coming out of Melbourne and moving into other capital cities, because everybody just wanted to get away, from the city. And I guess that then translated to, slow growth, where other capital cities were net gaining, that kind of growth. But I guess what had happened towards the end of last year was that the government saw that things had slowed down. They wanted to raise confidence all over again, and they introduced all these incentives. First home owner grants increased. There was a waiver of 50% of stamp duty for all purchases under $1 million. So it was quite a juicy incentive to get people, to get people back in the market, and I guess it worked because the last 6 months has proven, or up until the end of financial year, has proven that Melbourne is still modest, growing in a very modest way. So, house and land in specific dwellings, some perform better than the others, but really in effect, to see an overall growth, quarterly of 6%, and the quarter before that at around just under that as well. So it just proves that the movement, whether it was the government incentive or it was that, rebirth of everybody wanting to buy out of that lockdown, definitely has shown in property prices.
That's interesting. So it's interesting to see that these markets are rebounding quite strongly after lockdowns and restrictions are put in place. And COVID is, it's really not disrupted the market as much as you would expect from afar, which is interesting to see.
Yeah. For sure.
It's I guess and looking at the UK, they've managed to rebound out quite well, and we saw about 14% growth in house prices across the country. And I think it's good to see that the confidence is still there in people to be investing. I think these government stimulus packages and the grants are really helping people get onto the ladder and almost speeding the process up in a sense.
And they have.
People have been waiting for it. Yeah, I agree. So that'll be interesting to continue watching. Do you, in regards to house prices, do you think we'll continue to see the prices rise over the next 6 to 12 months, or do you think there'll be a bit of a drop now that some of the stimulus is?
Look, a few months ago, Melbourne tipped over the $1 million, median price, for homes. So the way I see it is, whilst people are motivated still to buy in the market, I think there's going to be eventually a very, a little bit of a cool off and a little bit of a correction. And I just read an article this morning that they believe that the loans have peaked, and they're starting to see a little bit of a drop. So that just proves that there was a big hype in the market, and people, I guess that they rode that wave. But needless to say, it never crashes. Capital cities like Sydney and Melbourne, it takes pandemics, GFCs, big life events for things to really crash. So whilst things are easing off, there's still some serious buyer confidence.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see how that does continue to travel, what trends we do keep seeing. I hope it's all positive. I think it's going to head in the right direction. I don't see any reason of it really slowing down at the moment.
Look, we all know that Melbourne is about 3 to 4 years of surpassing Sydney's population. So you've got the reigning queen, Sydney, and then you've got the the sister that wants to follow. So I think Melbourne is on track. It's going to take some time and a lot more of a push in population growth. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a really different forecast when our borders reopen and the influx and the backlog of people and the migrants are trying to get into this country. And I feel that we're going to see a serious housing demand in the next year or so.
Sure. Pick up.
Just my little crystal ball,
You could predict it. And I guess being a Melbourneite yourself, is there areas of focus at the moment or places that you're really paying higher attention to? I didn't mention it at the start of the podcast, but you do some development stuff as well.
I do.
Have you been looking at getting into parts of Melbourne to run or develop some new sites?
Not new sites entirely. But I'll go back to your first question as to where to look out for. I think the beauty about Melbourne, investing in Melbourne is it's geographically it's quite easy to recognise growth corridors because it's quite centralised. You've got north, east, south, west, and that's really about it. You've got regional and country Victoria, etc. But the most important part is that where the government infrastructure at the moment is being pushed out to, and I feel like that is an idea of where new estates, new demand has been met for the government to recognise that further infrastructure needs to go out. And I think entirely I'm really pushing out to the west of Melbourne. We're about 30 to 40 kilometres out. Wyndham Vale side. You've got estates that have now fully built, and now you've got new estates that are being released because there was demand and people have bought out the previous estates. So, and the prices are relatively still quite viable, Chris. Paying $600,000 for a house and land in these estates is really quite affordable to the blue collar, with 2 kids, or your middle class or your middle income earners. These are still very, very desirable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, going back to your point around the corridors and identifying the north, south, east and west, wherever it may be, but Melbourne's quite an accessible city from an access point of view, transport as well. Other than the airport, airport's a hassle to get to, but I feel you could be 30 minutes from the city in your direction
at the moment, and that's actually going to be linked into the CBD and linked out to the west of what I was just mentioning. So another growth factor, I think, for people to get into Melbourne.
Yeah, massively. I think that'll be a massive boost to the Melbourne market as well. It'll help connectivity from international buyers as well. People who just that ease of access in a sense as well. I guess talking about some of the stock that we have at the moment in Victoria, and getting your perspective on what is your favourite stock essentially in our Victoria.
I think I already gave it away. I think it's our Wyndham Vale stock at the moment. I see it as a very entry level opportunity for people to invest and buy into. because we know that when you buy something at entry level and there's room for expansion and it's eyed for more growth, then you would automatically assume that the dwellings that are closer are going to be more valuable than the newer estates that are going to be built out. So you can actually capitalize on the further growth that will happen in that region. Now, I'm not saying that's only the short term, that's probably the short term gain, but it really is dependent on your investment strategy. But growth for Melbourne would have to be the strategy and the key factor for your portfolio, because that area is not only expanding from a government infrastructure side, it's got further employment opportunities will rise, and then eventually migration, because of its entry price point, people would see the opportunity and see the affordability.
Definitely. I think that goes back to the point about population growth as well, surpassing the big sister of Sydney in a sense in the next 4 or 5 years. And
I think
that there's so much land between, just so much land around Melbourne as a whole. It's not restricted. It's got space to grow out.
You've got new estates in Sydney.
So I think that'll be
70, 80 kilometres out. So that's where there's new estates start from. The new estates are 35 kilometres out of Melbourne. So I don't know if you would ask me, as much as Sydney has proven itself to be, a market to invest into, but I think 35 kilometres out from the CBD as opposed to 60, 70 and paying 200-300k more, I know where I would put, I would gamble my money. So
definitely, that makes
you
sense.
Can tell
I think that could
lead I've
us.
got Melbourne pom-poms, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm here cheering for Brisbane. You're there cheering for Melbourne. Louis for Canberra. We've got a diverse mix.
Yeah.
I guess that on your last point around the 600k investment, if you were in a position today to make a 600k investment, would you be looking to buy in Jubilee or Wyndham Vale as a whole?
Look, 600k can give you somewhat of good options, but I want to answer this as neutrally as I can. But it really all is dependent on your strategy of your property portfolio. So if you've identified that, and if you were to choose, something based on 600 grand, I would definitely push you towards a land component purchase. Something with multiple bedrooms, standard test time, something that's suited to the demographic of the West itself. So land component is the answer in the West.
No, that's a good point. I think, simply. No, definitely though. It's where you'll see the largest amount of appreciation, or it's where the appreciation comes from with your property in a sense. So I think it's an important thing to factor in. 600k as a first investment as well as a decent budget in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to get you a house and land. Yeah. So it's I think what you're saying about the land component is a very valid and good point. So something to note for the future for sure. And hopefully I think, as you were touching on, as we mentioned before, the green space between Melbourne and Wyndham Vale, for example, or Werribee, there's just so much of it at the moment that's all being connected to the CBD, and with the rail line that's going to be put in place, the upgrade, the suburban rail loop that'll be started imminently from what I'm hearing. I think that's also going to fill in a lot of this land between these areas as well, which will be good for the West, and hopefully we'll continue to see some strong growths in house prices out that way. So if you were an investor and you were looking at Melbourne's blue chip suburbs, would you still consider investing in those higher end markets? Do you see a lot of value in the blue chip areas, and the likes?
I guess when you get closer and you have a bit more of an aggressive approach to your investment properties, there would be other great opportunities in a city as well, depending on the suburb that you choose, et cetera, et cetera. But if I was to choose between blue chip, which is modest growth, or I would choose further out 30, 35 kilometers where there's anticipated growth, you almost guarantee this manufacturing capital growth kind of style that's happening out that way, as opposed to your safe investment in your blue chip area. Now, I have an investment in a blue chip area, but I also have one out, further out from the CBD as well, and I guess they perform very differently. But
sure.
Again, I have to say it really does go down to your portfolio and its strategy.
Your goal. Okay. Could you see there being, over the next 10, 15 years, more areas added or classified as blue chip areas, so to speak, in Melbourne?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll start to see new corridors expand and areas develop into?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. Werribee 10 years ago was out in the sticks, and Werribee is obviously the redundant suburbs before Wyndham Vale and before Jubilee and these areas. Now, Werribee is $8-9 million plus. So, to answer that question, yes, there's going to be a lot more areas that's going to be built out, and there's going to be a lot more regions that need to I guess make count for the demand that's going to be surging through.
That'll be interesting to see. I think what you're saying about places like Werribee, that's interesting to think that the median house price is that 700,000-800,000 K mark, when even 10 years ago when I had visited in the past, and this was when we were thinking of moving to Australia at first, and Dad went and did a recce around Melbourne and its outer suburbs, and he couldn't bear the weather. He thought it was too much like the UK, and he was trying to escape the UK weather, so Melbourne wasn't the one.
I'm a Melbourneite.
It was a place...
So go ahead.
No, but it was a place that you wouldn't, Werribee at the time 10 years ago, you'd think, no, not a chance. But from what you see photos these days and developments and projects that are happening in the area and infrastructure that's going into the area, it's flipped on its head almost. It's a massive transformation. So it'll be interesting to see where the next real precinct area.
I think that's right. I'm a Melbourneite that's moved to Sydney because, as much as I love the cafe culture there. And the food scene and but I just the weather's horrible.
It is horrible.
But affordable.
It's its own little microclimate,
more affordable than Sydney.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It rains 3/4 of the year in England and no one complains about it. So I think Melbourneites are somewhat the same.
Accustomed to it.
Get on with it.
Agreed.
Exactly. You get on with it. So that's an interesting one. If you were to... So let's just give an example to some people listening, maybe around, what's something that we've worked on recently, maybe a house and land or a townhouse in Wyndham Vale, and maybe just give a bit of an idea on numbers in terms of what you could purchase for, like what we'd be looking at if we had for 500, let's say it's 500k, and then what sort of returns we'd be looking on that, and sort of growth and have a bit of a chat around that.
So if you've got a budget of a max of 500,000, we've got opportunities for 4-bedroom townhouses on parcels of land of about 200 square meters, and they're turnkey investments, ready to go, rentable. You're looking at rental returns of about 3.5% to about 3.8% gross yield. And that's decent for Melbourne. So, and not only that, but these, just to give you a comparison, say 200 square meters of land in Sydney will probably cost you, probably $500,000 alone. So in this case, under 500k, we'll get you a 4-bedroom townhouse, turnkey home, rentable, ready to go. So in Jubilee Estate,
it's almost a no-brainer, isn't it? If it's going to experience. I think the interesting part's going to be watching areas like Wyndham Vale expand and grow. I think the population increases that we've seen so far over the last, or from what I've read in reports over the last 10 to 15 years, has been massive. And then when you look forward, I think by 2041, from memory, it's predicted to grow by about another 240,000 people.
Yeah.
And considering the city itself only has about 300,000 in it at the moment, if it continues on that trajectory, it's going to be it's almost going to be its own little city outside of Melbourne, a big city outside of Melbourne in a sense. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
It's funny you say that, because Sydney has its sub-cities. It's got Parramatta, now it's got, the Western region, where all these estates are now popping up, and they're becoming quite self-sufficient. So Melbourne doesn't have that. Melbourne is centralised. So eventually, when growth meets, or the population expands or grows like Sydney, there's going to be other sub-cities. And investing will be a little bit more complicated, because you then have to now take into account a second CBD. That hasn't happened in Melbourne yet, but I foresee, according to also your trajectories, that will eventually happen, because there can't be one pathway into one CBD. No. So sorry for the
It's going to be interesting to watch it grow. It's got to happen. So we'll see where that area is. If you were to, and this is completely off topic in comparison to the west, just to throw a spanner in the works, but have you been paying much attention to what's been happening in Cranbourne, or that Mornington Peninsula area on the east?
I guess the southeast has a very similar story to the west. So the southeast is definitely a region that is expanding. There's not a lot out that way, and I guess the selling factor, or why people are persuaded to go out that way, because the southeast is near the ocean. So, but with that being said, that's another region with the freeways that have been recently expanded to meet the demand that's happening out that way. Still affordable options down in those regions.
Okay. It'll because Cranbourne's an interesting one. Cranbourne and even Mornington Peninsula, there were some interesting areas out in the southeast in the past. But the transformation that you're starting to see in that area, I think, is massive, and connectivity to the city is already there, like you just said, around the upgrades to highways and stuff as well. So it'll be good to see what. I think there's so much opportunity in Melbourne. I think the opportunity is so expansive that it can really grow in any direction it wishes, in a sense. So it's just identifying these growth corridors like Wyndham Vale and like Cranbourne and the likes, and we'll continue to see some steady and solid growth in these areas over time.
Absolutely agree.
I think in the foreseeable future. So it'd be good to see, and like you touched on around the value of, or the dwelling value increases over the last 12 months, or last financial year, sorry. But it's 10.4% in Melbourne for the year is massive growth as a whole, despite the circumstances. And I think if we continue to see, once, like you touched on earlier, the foreign investment coming back in, overseas investment, confidence from interstate again, and I think that growth will continue on a similar trajectory. I can't see why not. There's the money's there. Overseas money's a massive contributor to the Australian market.
If it does fluctuate, so be it. Yeah. But you're basing your first investment on a 10% return in your first year, so that's okay. You've done really well. A lot better than any other term deposit. A lot better than any other savings account. It's a good return. So if it does drop to 6 to 8% conservatively, again, it's a viable option. It's a viable investment option.
It's still very decent.
Yeah,
definitely. I agree with that. It's good to see, and I'm excited to see what is going to come from the reopening of borders. I think a lot of money will be sitting there waiting to flurry into the country in a sense, but time will tell. We'll see. I guess the last question I wanted to ask you today, and it's more of a personal question, and I'm sure you'll be wanting to open up about this. Get to know the real Sam, but it's a question around, what does a wealthy life mean to you?
A wealthy life, to me.
So what do you identify as a wealthy life, in a sense?
I think the honest truth. I don't know which avenue. Should I go the real avenue, or should I go the property avenue on this? Because I've got two takes. I think
let's have the real.
I think what wealthy would mean to me is having liberty in choices and decisions you make, and having no restrictions of your liberties. And I think that's the truth and that's what true wealth is. Possessions, monetary value are really good, but they can only take you so far. But I really feel like freedom freedom of making your own, investment decisions, life decisions, I think is the true essence of wealth.
Yeah,
you can tell I've gone through a lot of lockdown
philosophy. I've really been thinking about it long and hard. How are you managing with lockdown? You're staying positive? Going to the gym still?
I'm always finding something to do when there's nothing to do, so...
Exactly, for the day. Keep you busy, out of trouble. But no, that's good. That was a good answer. I like it, and I agree. So it's good to get these different perspectives from different guests and on what their takes are. Yeah. Everyone has. Could I
ask what yours is, or have you already said it in other podcasts? You don't have
gosh. I haven't said it in the past, actually.
Okay.
It's the first time I would be disclosing it, but I feel like I've got a mix of them now. I've heard everyone else's different perspective, but to me, a wealthy life is, I'm not one to care too much about the flashy cars and the flashy accessories and all that sort of stuff. In a sense, to me, it's just being able to live comfortably and still do the things that I want to do with my life, and having that passive income that's gonna help me grow as a person and grow my career. But I'm not there worrying about having 2 Ferraris in the garage or living in a $50 million house or £50 million house. It's being able to live comfortably, and being able to do what I want to do in my life, and get grow my career, grow my myself as a person, really is what matters to me. So it's being able to essentially have that passive income and make sure that
there's actually no right or wrong answer, Chris. So it's whatever pings to you, really.
It's an interesting one. It's a good one, and everyone seems to have a different perspective on what they want and what they want to achieve with a wealthy life, so to speak. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to have the money there and being able to do extravagant things, but at the end of the day, it's about being happy and living a good life, and being able to do the things that you want to do with your money. So I think that's a bit of me, but I think that's about it for us tonight. You need to get into some margaritas, mate.
End it on a good spiritual note. I like that.
Exactly. You should have a shot of tequila there, ready to down it.
I'm ready to go. So.
Well, enjoy. It's been great to have you on the show. Really enjoyed chatting to you.
It was really good.
We'll have to get you. We'll get you on again.
Sure.
We can have another chat. Well, next time maybe we'll be in Australia.
Yeah.
But thank you.
All good.
And for everyone listening, I hope you've enjoyed. Feel free to like or comment and subscribe to the channel. And we look forward to hearing from you all soon. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
See you.